What's up, Goon Squad? It's your boy back again, Jody MF Keith, aka Nolagold, here with a deck primer. Yes, we have a sweet deck. It's been making waves recently. I want to give credit where credit's due. I think Mega Mawai was the first one to put out a video about this deck, but it's called Casino. Casino, this deck, I recently played it in the DOR 12 to great success. I went 8-1 in the Swiss, with my only loss being in the round where it got banned. Coincidence much? I think so. Tell you a little bit about this deck. The first thing you need to know about this deck is that it's a combo deck. There's a lot of things that people do and a lot of plays people make with this deck that I think might be causing people not to see the potential in this deck. And so hopefully this video will help clear up some of the misconceptions about this deck, as well as some lines that should be strayed away from, or some very big plays that you could be making with this deck to really increase your win rate. So the combo in this deck is quite simply leveling your champions. We have Jinx and we have Twisted Fate, which is a very odd combination of champions because of their level up requirements. If you look at Jinx, Jinx needs an empty hand.
Jinx stands for Jinx. Durr.
For Jinx to level up, and Twisted Fate needs you to draw 8 cards. Well, Nolagold, tell me, how does one draw a bunch of cards and then also empty their hand? Well, that's where a lot of discard effects come into play. There's plenty of cards in this game that require you to discard cards. We have chosen the best of them for this because there's a lot of efficient card draw. We're going to get into that. But the basis of this deck is to level these champions. We're going to be drawing a lot of cards. We're going to be discarding a lot of cards to level both these cards, both these champions up. On top of that, one of the things that I think that makes this deck more powerful than most is that it plays a third champion, what I like to call a third champion, the slot bot. Yes, the slot bot, you spin to win. Slot bot grants +1/+0 for each card you drew last round, then shuffle my stats. So it starts with 5 total stats, and then at the start of the next round, if you only drew 1 card, then it'll get +1 stats, and then it'll shuffle them. Well, whenever we're drawing a bunch of cards in a turn, this thing can get +4 stats on the next turn, which is worth a lot of advantage. Even though it's in one body, so it can be removed, it does kind of look like leveling itself up with all the card draw. So the card draw not only levels up the Twisted Fate, the discard effects don't just level up the Jinx because you discard and then draw. They also level up the slot bot in a different way. So it's kind of like we have 3 different champions that we're trying to level up. So keep that in mind. Slotbot's really important. And I think the order that you want to play them is Slotbot into Twisted Fate into Jinx. You want to focus, if all 3 of those cards are in your hand, you probably want to start by leveling your Slotbot. Obviously be mana efficient when you can, but you want to start working on your Slotbot and then work into your Twisted Fate and then into your Jinx. One problem with this deck is that the Twisted Fate and the Jinx, they're both low health units. And those units can die pretty easily or don't do well in combat, at least on a defensive. But the slot bot can grow and be really big, and then can also attract some of that removal. Like if you play a slot bot and your opponent has a lot of Mystic Shots or Grasp or those kind of removal spells, they're going to go all out to try and remove it because they're scared to gamble. The thing might grow too big. And so if they're allocating a lot of damage-based resource for the slot bot, it's taking the heat off your next champion, which is Twisted Fate, or then Jinx. So, and of course, you're going to draw different cards, so you should always focus on leveling all 3 of those cards as fast as possible, with Jinx being the very last, because it just makes sense for Jinx to be your final plays, because the Rockets can end the game. Also, Jinx should not come down unless it's going to level up in the same turn or in the very next turn. You shouldn't really just be playing it out there to attack. That's kind of important. And if you can try and, get some attention on your slot bot, TF, Jinx. Also, Twisted Fate, sometimes you want it to come down so it can start seeing you draw the cards. But sometimes there's an opportunity in particular matchups where the red or the gold card are particularly useful. And so maybe waiting on them is really good. The flexibility of Twisted Fate makes it worth keeping in your hand sometimes, except you have to know the matchups where you really want to level your TF, and that's your clear path to victory, in which case you start aggroing the TF to make the blue cards. To support this, we also play other units like Astute Academic. Astute Academic is
Don't worry, I've read all about this.
A 1-drop, a 1/2 gives you some early board pressure. That whenever you draw a card, it gets +1/+0. So with all the card draw between Pick a Card and Rummage, and the Jinx drawing extra cards, the Twisted Fate drawing extra cards, the Brash Gambler drawing extra cards, this Astute Academic really can get turned up to a 5 power. Whenever it attacks with Brash Gambler, it's 4 power. Quite strong. Trades can, if you play it in combination with a single extra draw, can be big enough to block fearsome units and trade with Callistas and things of that like. Astute Academic also just can draw that Mystic Shot away from future TFs and things of like that, as well as also being on the board early to be able to block against aggressive decks and generally trade with whatever they have. Follow that up with Pool Shark. Pool Shark is nice because we get to draw an extra card. I think one of the big mistakes people make whenever they play this deck is they play their Pool Shark wrong. Basically, when you play the Pool Shark for 1 mana, on the next turn you draw a card and it's fleeting. The fact that it's fleeting means that if you don't use it, it will be discarded. So, this is generally not a turn 1 play. And I say generally because in this game of Legends Runeterra, you really cannot put confinements on your cards all the time. Sometimes you have to adapt to different situations. But as a general rule, if you're just starting out with this deck, you should avoid playing this on turn 1 and 2. And then you want to be looking to play it on turn 3. Now, some other situations come up where the Pool Shark can be played on 2 or 1. If you're against an aggressive deck that is playing a 1-drop 2/1 and you really want to block it, you're playing against Darius and you're up against a very aggressive Noxious deck or something like that, a Demacia deck, and you want to keep the game going, protect your life total. There are no life gain sources in this deck, so the advantage of keeping your health total high in some matchups is important. So sometimes you will want to play it on 1. I generally don't recommend it because you get so much more advantage even by playing it, say, on turn 2. The only time you should be looking to play it on turn 1 is if you have to block. They have the attack token turn 1, and you want to play it on turn 1, and you also have backup in the form of Rummage. Because if you have a Rummage for turn 2, then you can maybe fire off a Rummage early to get back that card advantage. Because against the aggro decks, you just need to stabilize. Once you stabilize, especially if you have like a Rummage, and then like you're able to stabilize into a turn 4 Brash Gambler or something to that effect, then it's worth playing that Bull Shark on turn 1. Doesn't come up often, but I don't want to put never in your vocabulary because at the casino, you just got to take chances sometimes. So you have this Bull Shark. Also, sometimes it does replace itself. So, I mean, what's the difference between playing the Bull Shark on turn 1 and trading and then having a Mystic Shot the same thing on turn 2? So if we're going to have the Mystic Shot on turn 2, why don't we just Bull Shark on turn 1? Maybe we can high roll, it is the casino after all, into a fleeting 1 or 2 drop that we could actually take advantage of. And this is why in my list, we bring up the Shell Shocker. Shell Shocker is the next 1-drop unit that gives us a total of 8 1-drop units if we're not counting Jury Rig. And the Shell Shocker is nice because it's 1 mana, it's 2/1, it attunes. It takes a lot of pressure off your Pool Shark having to block early or having to trade an Academic, which can be a powerhouse later and block fearsome units later, or apply a lot of pressure when you're turning the corner and you're drawing a lot of cards. Well, the Shell Shocker does that, but more importantly, the Shell Shocker gives you Attune, which is basically makes this a free play in the context of total mana if you're mixing your spell and regular mana together. So being able to play this 2/1 on turn 1, you attune. So in the control matches, it's really nice because you can get aggressive with it early. It attunes, so you can have the Shell Shocker, and then having an additional 1-drop is very important, I think, not only for having a board position to where whenever you get to turn 4, you can be aggressive with your TF and blue card with it. You're not as required, or the value's not, the incentives aren't there for you to do red card or gold card as much. You can talk yourself into blue card, and because again, this deck is trying to level up its champions, all of them. The TF, the Jinx, and the Slotbot. So I use blue card more than most. I would think on Twisted Fate, at least in my experience, I try and focus on blue card as best as I can. Not only because it promotes mana efficiency, more mana, and then it also helps level itself, and it levels the Slotbot as well, and can just be good value in, control and mid-range matches. I generally like to do the blue card. So the Shell Shocker's nice there because it can come down early and trade, it can chump block, it can buy you time for you to get to the TF. And then against the control decks, like I said, you can come down with the Shell Shocker and just get aggressive with that and Academics, and then you have more 1-drops that bank spell mana. And I'm going to get to that when we get to the spells, but banking the spell mana is really important for the big picture. Again, remember, we're working on this big picture of the deck, because if you get the big picture down, you'll figure out the micro along the way. But we're trying to level up our 3 champions. And so in that effect, the Shell Shocker makes it to where we can blue card more often with the Twisted Fate. It's another cheap 1-drop that you can, help empty your hand. It helps empty your hand with the Jinx as well, because it's a 1-drop, as well as replacing itself mana-wise to where you can then play another spell as well. So I think it fits the deck. This is probably the flex spot, but it feels like it ties a lot of things together. I have seen other people try different cards. I've seen Works map so you can high roll with the Slotbot, which I think makes the deck more memey, which, I love a good meme. And I'm not going to deny that, having your Slotbot be unblockable, or hell, even your Brash Gambler being able to attack and not have to worry about anything is nice. But I think more often that card will be worse and will be better used discarded than anything else. So I do like the Shell Shocker for what it does to promote that game plan. Moving on, Flame Chompers. This is also a set of cards much like the Jury Rig. These are kind of in the same category. When we talk about cards that you pretty much don't want to play, I have cast Flame Chompers before to try and level up Jinx when I didn't have discard stuff, but for the most part, you're not going to be casting this card. You will be discarding it to your discard effects, because when it's discarded, you summon it. O2, Challenger. Now, the Challenger, it's not going to be challenging much, but sometimes this thing will pull. If you have a suit up, you can eat Ezreals. You can suit it up on a block. There's a lot of plays where you Jury Rig into the Flame Chompers and then suit it up and block a 3-power thing. That happens a lot. And then it survives to be able to then chomp out whatever they had left on the board on the next attack, open attack. You open attack a lot with this deck. Generally, if you think about it, you generally want to be open attacking a good bit and then getting your opponent to commit their spells before. I like to go for card advantage to build towards a combo more than aggression, but you do have to know a turn where the game turns, and matchups dictate that. And the Flame Chopper plays a big part in getting through with some heavy aggression, forcing your opponent to actually do something about all your attackers because they can't block with the Flame Chompers. It pairs well with the suit up as well. And, just a general challenger is fine. And it's a free roll. Another thing to note about this mechanic, whenever I'm discarded Summon Me, we have Pool Shark, and then we also have Pick a Card, which I'll get into in a little while. The Pick a Card, they both produce fleeting effects, Brash Gambler as well. If you get a Jury Rig or Flame Chompers as a fleeting spell, at the end of turn, it will be discarded as part of the fleeting mechanic. And that means that it will come into play. You will summon it. So do keep that in mind. Sometimes you don't need to actually worry about using those as discard outlets, or you don't, you don't have to find a discard outlet for them when they're fleeting, because they will happen automatically. Also, to that effect, I didn't touch on this for Jinx. This is also important. Jinx sees those fleeting cards. So if you get a Jinx, don't forget that if you play the Jinx and then you also you play the cards that aren't fleeting, you will discard those fleeting cards at the end of round, and it'll level up at the end of round. So that means you'll go ahead and start the turn off after pitching the fleeting cards with a leveled up Jinx, drawing 2 cards. So that's a nice interaction between the fleeting and the Jinx, and the fleeting and the discard outlet. The discard, not outlet, the discard mechanic on these cards here, Flame Chomper and Jury Rig. Next up, Slotbot. Now, we talked about it a little bit. It's the 4th champion. his third champion. So Slotbot is the type of card that you want to stick out there on turn 3, get it rolling as fast as possible. But you also want to watch out, because if you can play around a Thermo Beam or something like that, then maybe you should, because getting him through the first turn, and you really don't want to block with him much because he's going to constantly grow. If you can set up a turn where you actually draw a lot of cards the turn you play the Slotbot, is probably the best way to take effective Slotbot. So, like I said earlier, if you're going to play your Pool Shark on turn 2, which you might have to do, then the follow-up play on that Pool Shark is you're going to have banked spell mana. If you Pool Shark on turn 2, is to play the Slotbot on turn 3 and then maybe Rummage. Okay? And you can Rummage away that fleeting card that you drew off the Pool Shark. You see? And then now we have a turn where we drew 3 cards, so the very next turn the Slotbot's going to end up with +4 stats. So for 3 mana and that line of play between the Pool Shark before it and the Rummage, the turn that you played it, we're talking about a turn where you're paying 3 mana for 8 stats. That's, as good as you can get, really. Think about it, 3 mana, 4/4. That's 8 stats. So 8 total stats. Again, it's random. That's why we call this deck Casino. But that's just good value. Mana for stat-wise. And you didn't really give up much, because the Rummage, you had to discard 2 to draw 2, but one of them came off the Pool Shark. So, and then you can set up your plays after that. Beyond that, we have Brash Gambler to round out our last of our followers, if we're not counting Jury Rig. Poor Jury Rig. There's memes about that card. Brash Gambler. Okay, Brash Gambler, 4 mana, 4/5. To play, you have to discard 2 cards. Whenever you attack, you draw 2, and they are fleeting. So you need to make sure that whenever you're lining up your Brash Gambler attacks, that you're going to have enough mana to play the fleeting cards. One of the best lines for playing Brash Gambler is when your opponent has the attack token, and they go through their turn, and they just blow through their turn. That's the turn you want to play the Brash Gambler. That way, you can have a turn where you can open attack with the Brash Gambler, and then you have full mana to be able to actually take advantage of those cards. You can be a little more aggressive with how you use the Brash Gambler, and that's tied together by Rummage. Rummage is really the best card in this deck. As many games as I've played with it, it ties a lot of things together. This card definitely does. It's one of the cards you want to use wisely, but know what it can do, and the ranges on your Rummages are really going to add to your win percentages. So, Rummage, like this Brash Gambler, aside from the Brash Gambler is really good at blocking. It's a 4/5, so it can block fearsome units. It's got high toughness, where it can block, take a hit, and then attack and get some cards back, which is huge, because that's just a large source of card advantage, especially if the Brash Gambler, when you played it, you discard Flame Chompers, can really take out a big blocker to where the Brash Gambler can get in and then still be around, where it's like, oh man, I gotta kill this Brash Gambler, or they're gonna draw more cards while you're also hitting them for 4. So, very powerful card in this deck. I do like it as a 2-of, because the requirement to play it doesn't make for a good top deck if you're low on cards, but it does have a huge power effect. Also, one thing to note, the Brash Gambler synergies with the Astute Academic. Like I said, if you attack with the Gambler and the Astute Academic, you'll draw the cards. Also note that you have to lock in the attack, which includes any challengers that you might have whenever you attack with the Brash Gambler. And so, if you do that, you got to know that without knowing what 2 cards you're going to draw. But you do have to remember what's in your deck. You can use a deck tracker. Those are things you can do to see what cards. You can see odds. Generally, you should be good if you have a deck tracker to know the probabilities of drawing things. I try to use, Yu-Gi-Oh! Heart of the Cards personally. But there's a good chance that, say you have Flame Chompers out here, that you might hit a suit up. And if that's a possibility, then maybe the Flame Chomper should challenge something that the suit up will have a good effect on. Or maybe you should attack with these other things if you think that hit and suit up is a possibility, or align with the Brash Gambler. Also, you might want to attack, if you're getting aggressive, you could attack your 1 power units, or your 2/1, or, Astute Academic would be bigger, or maybe even your Twisted Fate. I've done this before. Attack with Twisted Fate as well when I got a full board and I'm pushing for damage when we're turning the corner in the game. and I'll attack with that as well. It's a little scary to do with Brash Gambler because obviously you're drawing a bunch of cards, so that TF is going to be close to leveling up. But with the quick attack, some blocks just aren't going to be good, especially if you draw anything like Suit Up or Get Excited or Mystic Shot. It makes any block on TF foolhardy, pretty much. And there is an element of bluffing in this deck as well, in that we have quick attack units here and here. Do take advantage of that, but be wary of the fact that you have to level up your champions. That's like something you have to do, and Slotbot's included in that to really win. Brash Gambler isn't going to do the full 20 damage by itself. It will draw you into your champions, all three of them. But for the most part, it's not in the game by itself. So these cards are important. So be careful if you're doing any gambling with these in combat steps where your opponent may just make a hero block. But doing crazy attacks, supported by Suit Up and Get Excited and Mystic Shot, are pretty common with this deck as well. And that's where part of the gamble comes in with the Brash Gambler, is attacking and banking on drawing one of these removal spells. It's more common with a board full of Pool Sharks and Shell Shockers or Jury Rig tokens, because generally the Brash Gambler, you're going to want to pitch like a Jury Rig and a Flame Chompers, and so getting those in, because sometimes you want to chump block. That happens a lot. What I mean chump block is whenever you just take a small unit and you throw it under the bus in front of something big, generally without overwhelm. So the Brash Gambler is nice because it'll fill your board up with Jury Rig and Flame Chompers. It's a nice discard outlet. It's also really good at leveling Jinx, because you can lead out on Jinx and then play the Brash Gambler behind it. Or I don't recommend this that often because how Brash Gambler works. You can open attack with the Brash Gambler to draw cards, but if you already have a Jinx, so this combination of Jinx plus Brash Gambler, you want to be careful, and you want to gauge this based off of what kind of removal your opponent has. Because if you can play the Jinx and you know it's not going to die that turn, and then you can open by playing Brash Gambler, that's going to make it very easy to actually level up the Jinx right there. And that's generally the line you want to take on it. But again, remember that you want to be leveling Slotbot, Twisted Fate, Jinx. Brash Gambler ties them all together as well, because it's leveling up Slotbot, it's leveling up Twisted Fate, it's leveling up Jinx. Sometimes you'll suicide a Brash Gambler to level up a Slotbot if you have mana to play the cards, or Rummage to pitch them away. So Rummage, like I said, the glue that really ties the whole deck together is Rummage. Drawing cards towards your TF, pitching towards Jinx. There's turns where you can level up both your champions at the same time, with your Slotbot getting a bunch of stats coming. Also, didn't touch on this earlier, but Slotbot, they have a little number at the bottom if you mouse over the card in the game. That tells you how many cards you drew this turn, so you know how many stats it's getting on the next turn, how many extra stats it's getting on the next turn. Rummage, it's an extra discard outlet for your Flame Chompers and your Jury Rig. It's also, the best card with all three of your champs. And then you can also use Rummage in weird spots to high roll for a Suit Up. If you need a high roll, like in some spots in the game, it's like, man, if I had TF here, it would be insane. And so you have a lot of fodder that you can discard to the Rummage to actually draw into that stuff. If you need to find a Get Excited or a Mystic Shot, we do have 6 of these. This is pretty standard for a lot of P&Z decks for removal. We don't play any Thermo Beams. It's all fast speed damage that goes face, because when we have to close games out, it's important that all of our removal can also go face as well. We can win outside of combat pretty easy with Jinx Rockets, as well as the Get Excited and the Mystic Shot. But the Rummage can help find things in a pinch, and it's not too much of a cost. You got to think about it sometimes whenever you pitch the Jury Rig or the Flame Chompers. That's the free roll. But if we're going in and we're adding stats to the Slotbot, that's some value that we're gaining. So being down a card, but being +2 stats on a Slotbot on the next turn is kind of big. And some matchups, like if you anticipate a Will of Ionia or something like that, then investing in that Slotbot isn't that great. But if we're playing against a heavy Demacia deck where the bigger unit would be better, or same thing against Noxious where the bigger unit is just going to be better, then and the removal isn't Vengeance, Will, hard removal, then the value you're getting off that Rummage with the Slotbot out there is a lot bigger. So you can be a little more aggressive with it in certain situations. As a general rule, though, so if you're just starting out with this deck, I recommend that you don't rummage unless you have a TF, a Jinx, or a slot bot. But there are other times that you have to use the rummage to help find those cards. And so that's okay too. But for the most part, you want to save them. And remember that if you cast the rummage with a Jinx out and you pitch the cards, it'll actually level the Jinx before you draw the other cards. You could also rummage, if you have rummage and one other card in your hand, you can just go ahead and rummage the one card away. You will be down a card, but it will empty your hand in the case that you have Jinx out there, something like that. It is really one of the best cards in the deck. And so finding out the line on where to play the rummage and get more comfortable with using rummage is going to be very important for your win rate. So look out for that. Again, I already covered the Mystic Shot and Get Excited. Another part of the Get Excited is discarding. So pairing a Get Excited with a Jinx can really make it level up super early. And then also Get Excited is nice with a Shell Shocker because against an aggressive deck like something like Elise or something that goes Crimson Disciple on turn 2, you can start off with the Shell Shocker, then follow that up with Get Excited to really have some serious board presence to where turn 4 there is no pressure, and then you can start pressuring them with your Jinx and your Twisted Fate and Brash Gambler and your Slot Bot, things like that. So this Get Excited is nice. That's another reason I like the Shell Shocker. It's a really good opener against aggro, Shell Shocker, and a Get Excited. Get Excited clears a lot of things. It goes face. It's a discard outlet towards the Jinx. You could also, like, against aggro, you can, like, Get Excited one thing, pitch in a Jury Rig to be able to chump block another thing, and then that'll rope you right into your turn 4 to start setting things up with Jinx and TF, Brash Gambler. Pick a card. Pick a card's big. You have to shuffle a card from your hand to your deck, similar to Get Excited. Both 3-mana spells. This one's burst, but this one allows you to draw 3 fleeting on the next turn. That's huge, but it's similar to Get Excited because you can get 2 cards out of your hand by playing it. Because you get to pick a card and then the card you shuffle back in. So that plays into your Jinx leveling up or getting the Jinx Rocket. And then the pick a card allows you to draw 3 extra cards on the next turn. So that plays into drawing extra cards for your Slot Bot and then your Twisted Fate. So this card is really hard to play, much like Rummage. And it's all about knowing when to play it. And generally, you don't want to play this unless you already have a TF out. It's really like the late game of this deck is the pick a card. And I say it's the late game because it's only 3 mana, so you can play it as early as turn 2. But picture this as a later drop, a 4 drop, type 5 drop. You don't want to play it unless you have a Slot Bot out already. Or not already. You don't need a Slot Bot out already, but you need a Twisted Fate out when you play it. So Twisted Fate will see the 3 cards draw. You also maybe want a Slot Bot out, so Slot Bot can see the cards drawn. The difference between the Twisted Fate and the Slot Bot in the pick a card situation, though, is that the Slot Bot will actually not need to see the cards drawn on the next turn because it gets the stats on the following turn. So you can pick a card with the intention of playing Slot Bot on the next turn, but again, that's something you need to prepare for. You need to be like, okay, can I just play a Slot Bot next turn? What is my opponent's turn going to look like whenever I play a Slot Bot next turn? Is this Slot Bot going to be safe as a 1/4? Am I going to be forced into some plays that are going to make it to where playing a Slot Bot next turn is not going to be good? Because then maybe I shouldn't pick a card. If I had this Slot Bot in hand that I'm going to have pick a card now, and then I'm a Slot Bot next turn, what am I going to do with the 3 fleeting cards? That's a whole nother issue. And again, that's where something like this line of play comes up, where you'll pick a card with the intention of Slot Bot on the next turn, and then on the next turn, you draw a champion. Well, you're going to want to play that champion out of the fleeting cards for sure, but if Slot Bot is really big in that matchup, then you can play the Slot Bot and then make sure you have something backed up like Rummage. Because you can rummage away the pick a card cards, turn them into cards that don't have fleeting. So, Rummage, that's why Rummage is the best card, because it fixes your pick a card, it levels all 3 of your champions, and it fixes bad draws, as well as also being a discard outlet for your free Flame Chompers, Jury Rigs, and then you can also, high roll into Suit Ups with Rummage, which is nice as well. And so the last card is Suit Up, and Suit Up is 4 mana, set an ally to 4/4, and then it costs 2 less this round if you drew it. So 2 mana, make your thing a 4/4 is huge. It's paired best with Flame Chompers. It's good with Twisted Fate. If they point a Mystic Shot at your Twisted Fate, you'd be like, haha, it's a 4/4. That's cool. You also have, plenty of 1-drops. So when we're trying to apply pressure, like Shell Shocker in the suit up applies a lot of pressure early, 4/4 attacking on turn 2. That's huge. Same thing with Pool Shark or Academic. Whenever you pair the suit up with the Astute Academic, then it's a 4/4, but on the next turn, you draw a card, it'll be a 5/4. So that's big. Another thing to note about this card is that it sets the ally's power to 4/4. So that means if you have a damaged ally, you can set it to a 4/4, and it'll be a 4/4 undamaged. It's very important if you're playing around something like Ravenous Flock, things of that, like where your thing is damaged. You could also heal with it. You can set your Brash Gambler to, if it's already a 4/4, I've done this before. I made it into a 4/4 again because of how important it was in a Swain match. The draw ability on it, I wanted to keep it alive, and the only way I knew they can kill it in one shot would be a Ravenous Flock. So to avoid that, you can suit up the Brash Gambler. That's nice. And then sometimes you hardcast this thing for 4. It generally, if you draw it in the first 2 turns and you don't have anything to play it on, it's going to be, you're going to want to look to discard it to get excited or Rummage or Brash Gambler. But there are some times where spending 4 mana just maintaining board presence is fine as well. But you're going to be looking to discard it for sure. It's a very strong card. I like it a lot in this deck. And drawing it for 2 mana really gives you a lot of huge tempo advantage. Because, like I said, if you play it on something cheap, like Academic, Pool Shark, Shell Shocker, Flame Chompers, guess what? Your opponent's going to have to react to that. And when they react to that, they might not have the thing for the slot bot. Or if they have the thing for the slot bot, then they will get finished off by one of these champions. So it applies a lot of pressure, almost champion level pressure, very early. That can cause pressure burst pipes. And it'll definitely cause a lot of pressure on your opponent to be able to open the way for all the rest of your threats. And all of this deck, if you notice, the highest costing card is 4, so you make a lot of plays with this deck. That's huge. I did also want to mention the Pick a Card, because with Pick a Card, it gives the 3 cards fleeting. If you pick a card, if you shuffle back in a fleeting card with Pick a Card, then that fleeting card will always be fleeting in your deck. So if you draw it just for turn later, then it'll be a fleeting copy. So doesn't come up too often, but you do draw a lot of cards in this deck, so be mindful of that. Seriously worry about, but it is how the game works, and you should know all the functions of your deck and how that works. Again, and to that note, I also wanted to tell you about Twisted Fate. And once you have the level of Twisted Fate, the game's pretty easy, but don't punt it by playing a burst spell and expecting you to get the card. When you level up the TF, is that you'll get a blue card, then the red card, then the gold card, in that order. And if you play a burst spell, if your opponent, say, passes to you, and then you go into your turn, you can open attack, but you really want to suit up one of your units, or maybe you want to rummage, or maybe you want to jury rig to get an extra attacker. Just be careful, because if you play a burst spell, the TF will proc its blue card, and then whenever it procs the blue card, it goes on the stack as a fast speed skill, which your opponent could then interact with, and then will also get priority after it resolves. So you might not have that sweet open attack anymore if your opponent plays a big effect, maybe even Ruination. That would really just wreck you in some kind of way. So be wary of the fact that you're going to be passing priority by playing even burst spells with a level up TF. But I mean, if you have a level up TF, you're probably living all right. So now that all that has been said, I did want to talk a little bit more about the deck and why I think it's good, and also where it fits into the meta, which is why I think it's good. So if we look at the meta tier list, the most popular decks: Ezreal Karma, Heimer Combo, Anivia Control. In these matches, you should play similar, but also take into account the slight differences between all of them. Ezreal Karma and Heimer, they both are Ionia P and Z. They both play similar P and Z removal. We have both Get Excited and Mystic Shot in both decks. Ezreal can also make Mystic Shots whenever it connects. In these matches, you want to get on board as early as possible with, suit ups is really important at both countering their damage-based removal as well as putting a lot of pressure on your opponent early to bait out those removal spells. Slotbot is really big in both these matches, even though they have Will of Ionia, because it will draw a lot of removal from your future champions. TF is what you really want to level, but the fact is that it's very easy to remove with Mystic Shot and Vi. So in those cases, you just kind of want to always blue card. You pretty much almost blue card every time, just to be able to keep up with the card advantage that they get from Deep Meditation, as well as threatening to level the TF and really forcing them to use removal. Since your cards are pretty inexpensive, the Will of Ionia is not the best against anything but Brash Gambler, so you have to be especially cautious with committing to a Brash Gambler play. So in the matchups where they have Will of Ionia, you pretty much have to respect it, and you should only be playing Brash Gambler when A, you don't have much else to do, or B, it's going to be leveling up a Jinx the turn as soon as you play it. So outside of that, or it's just a free roll because you had a bunch of fleeting cards that you couldn't cast anyway. But you should always look to maybe make sure you can get the most out of your Brash Gambler in this match, because it is a very hard card for them to remove without Beam or Will of Ionia. So it also gives you a lot of card advantage, which is what you want to go for, is the card advantage in the control matches. You're going to be playing the aggro role, and being able to have a free flow of cards is going to really keep them off balance, because they're going to have very specific cards in different situations. And so just piling on, being able to get two champions, and like I said, Slotbot is a champion in this deck, in play at the same time, is really where you're going to take advantage of these matches. Being able to have an Ezreal, Karma, and Heimer combo match, being able to get two champions and play at the same time. You pretty much always blue card in the Ezreal Karma match, but whenever you look at the Heimer combo, things like Vi might make you want to do a yellow card, a gold card, and then things like multiple turrets might want you to be set up for a red card. Remember to always be pressuring your opponent, because you're the aggro. You have to close the game out, because their end game is going to be better than your end game. And generally, Ezreal Karma is not going to apply much pressure on you, while Heimer can apply a lot of pressure, and that's where like your TF might do a red card, things like that. But if you keep pressuring them, then it's going to make their champions a little worse, because like Ezreal's might have to go under the bus. Same thing with Heimer. But make sure you keep a Get Excited. I would definitely keep a Get Excited in my opener in either of these matches, to where they can't come down with the early Ezreal to be able to really get some advantage out of free Mystic Shots without having a combo. That's pretty big. So if I have Get Excited for Heimer and for Ezreal, that's huge. Also, Get Excited also kills the Karma. And so just having it, because you know the game's going to go long, is fine. Same thing with this matchup. Vi is the worst card that you could see coming out of this deck. Be careful of Claws of the Dragon. Know that it's there, but they're going to really need Claws of the Dragon if you're going wide on them with Astute Academics. That's really what you're looking for, is to build a board with Astute Academics. Slotbot. Don't forget that you can use Rummage in combat, especially if they have to block or they are forced into a block. You can use Rummage to grow the Astute Academic in combat. That's also big, to be able to push that extra damage. And I think Heimer is a worse matchup than Ezreal Karma. I never banned Ezreal Karma whenever I played this in a tournament, because of how good the casino match felt to me. And I think it is a favorable matchup, but the Ezreal Karma deck should not be discounted, because its end game will kill you by turn 10. So being able to manage the pressure that you can put on is very important. Gauge enough pressure and try not to get blown out by Ezreal just farming your stuff, or maybe just dying to an Ezreal at a certain point. But Suit Up is a really big card, even being cast at 4 mana, at just countering half of what removal they do have, and making sure you put it on something that does not get that you do not mind getting Will of Ionia is also big, because they might be counting on a Will of Ionia. And by that I mean, you could put it on a Pool Shark, they will it, you don't care. You put it on a Flame Chomper, you will it, they will it, you don't care, because you can discard it and get it free again. You do it on a TF to protect it, that's huge, because then if they will it, if they're forced into willing a TF before it levels, yeah, you're going to feel bad because it didn't level, but you're still going to get another card out of it by the blue card. So overall, you can match them in card advantage and maybe even outdo them in card advantage if you play it right. So watch out for your sequencing, and again, be careful with Brash Gambler. That's the most important things to know about those matches. Anivia Control is a little different because Anivia Control has Braum to really maintain a mid-game board presence, so be careful of that. And then it also has late game, Anivia plus Rekindler, so their late game is similar, but their clock is not as fast. But your board generally does not have high toughness, so the Anivia, as well as Whale and things like that, Wild Beast, etc., can actually interact with you pretty well. But one thing big to note is Ruination. That's something that you have to respect, because if you're overloaded on the board, they can Ruination. So maybe gauge how much pressure you're actually putting on them to where you don't get blown up or Ruination. Generally, you should be outdrawing this deck big time, and you can generally take some hits because the deck doesn't really close that fast. So make sure you're leveling your champions as best as you can. Get your Jinx down, do some rockets, and then be careful about, blowing Get Excited to the face, because this deck does have a lot of heals, so we're going to want to beat them on card advantage. That's really how we want to win this matchup, is on card advantage. So given the opportunity, make sure you get the most out of every card that you have. You can outgrind this deck in a way, especially because we're not looking to kill their Anivia, so they're not going to get value out of Rekindler or Harrowing. And, make sure that you're playing around the removal spells that they might have. So Avalanche, some people also play the box, careful of that. And then also Grasp as well. So learn how to play against those removal spells are going to be very important. Know what options they have available to them. And then, overload your opponent with card advantage is what we're looking to do here. Again, Brash Gambler is going to be really good at getting you some card advantage in this match. And then, of course, Jinx drawing 2 cards a turn. And then once you get that TF leveled up, they're going to be really forced to blow a Vengeance, or they're going to have to blow a Grasp on it. You can, or they might try and Avalanche it. But remember that you can protect it with your Suit Up. So a timely Suit Up. Sometimes not playing Suit Up for 2 mana is a big play, because the 2 mana that you save to play it now, if you bank that 2 mana, you might be able to get the blowout by spending 4 mana on the Suit Up later. Again, most of your deck, once you start hitting turn 7 or 8, you get to play your whole hand every turn anyway. So if you have a mid-game Suit Up, don't think that you have to use it because it's 2 mana. That's very important, and that play comes up often in this match in particular. Moving on, Darius Aggro. This matchup is kind of a race in a lot of ways. They're trying to kill you as fast as possible. You need to try and stabilize, but then you also need to be pressuring your opponent as well, because they have the in-game card of the Harrowing, which we have nothing to counter, except if you have like a level TF, maybe you can do some stunning and a decent amount of blocking. Brash Gambler is really good in this because it has a big butt to be able to block. It's a 4/5, so you can get that block in, and then our early drops can often trade with Saboteur and Legion Grenader, and our removal, Get Excited, pretty much clears out a lot of this, including Draven. But
Draven down.
Basilisk Rider can be a problem. Don't be scared to Suit Up and trade. If you can set up some value trades, it's even better. You can use your life total as value, because don't forget that you have TF. Sometimes if your opponent has the even attack turns, you can sandbag the TF to gold card the Darius.
This won't be a fair fight.
On turn 6, that's not that crazy. You could also just gold card the Basilisk Rider to set up a Mystic Shot if that's on the radar. But make sure you're doing as much damage to them as they're doing to you, or close to it, to where you can really swing the turn with that gold card, or you can swing the turn with a big Rummage into multiple things on the board for blocks, or Flame Chompers to really push through your lethal attack with Jinx as well. Your Jinx, they don't block that well at all. They're going to end up having to use a Noxian Fervor to kill it, and then you can blow them out with, any kind of fast speed or Rummage to level it up to even counter that effect. Because they don't have much removal outside of Noxian Fervor or you having to block. And so with that in mind, your champions are going to be running free for the most part. So slot bot, you want to get it down early because it can potentially high roll into some high toughness, which can really deal with these overwhelmed units, and blow your resources early to try and get on board as fast as possible. And that's pretty important. Don't generally you want to wait till turn 4. Like I said, when you have a champion before you start rummaging. But if you see a big line where you can make a big play, then you should definitely take it because you need to be able to match strokes before getting blown out. You don't want to get run over and then be forced into bad blocks and bad situations. So try and get ahead of that. And suit up is really big. If you can get a suit up to maybe block. Suit up blocking a Crimson Disciple is big. Because then you can, especially if you get it on a Flame Chompers, because then now you can challenge their Basilisk Rider. And in this match, generally they have to play their units, so be careful about it because if you pass priority, they're probably just going to jam. So take advantage of that by maybe sandbagging the TF on them. Be like, they're going to play something else and then we're going to red card them or we're going to gold card them or things like that. Also, red card's a little dangerous in this situation, a leveled up TF, because they have Crimson Disciple. So be careful. If you can remove the Crimson Disciple with a Get Excited, then that's a big play, especially as your first spell for turn if you have TF leveled up. Because you don't want to red card and give them the free 2 damage to put you in Decimate range. So that's important. I also have other videos of a couple games against the Darrowing, which you can definitely check out. Overall, I think the matchup is about 50-50. You do get run over by the overwhelmed units in some games, and then it's very draw dependent, I would say. It's about hitting your suit ups and getting on board early, and maybe getting Brash Gambler down there. Those cards are the biggest cards in the match. Scouts is another deck that's on the rise right now in popularity. And Scouts is, I think, a very favorable matchup for Casino, mostly because they don't have much removal. This list that we're showing on screen now plays single combat, but people have been straying away from single combat because I don't think it's really that good in the deck. So outside of the very few removals that they do have some challengers, which you can remove with your own removal, so you effectively deny their removal for your champions with your removal spells, which is big. And then they can pile on some pressure, so you need to make sure you put on some board presence. And again, suit up's huge for that because generally most of their things have 3 power, so you can usually get multiple blocks in out of one suit up. So suit up's really big in this match, and then them not having removal to interact with your TF makes it really safe for your TF level, as well as your slot block can get outrageously big. And you have efficient removal for things like MF. So overall, it's a good matchup. Tempo Sejuani is building some momentum in the current meta, at least in the tournament meta. So in this matchup, you got to remember that the game needs to end before the Riptide Rex comes down. Very few circumstances you survive the Rex because most of your units have low toughness. So the Rex will absolutely wipe your board. So being able to maintain board presence is huge. One jam to this is that any of our champions can really get waxed by a Sejuani. Sejuani can freeze and then make it vulnerable, which is huge. They also apply a lot of pressure with Island Navigators because, again, we don't have big units that block. Suit up is going to be big in that situation. I want making sure that they don't get too much pressure with their scouts. You do want to make sure you line that up well. And then the deck also counters this pretty big because all our removal is damage-based with the card Fury of the North. So it's kind of hard to play around this card, but you need to be aware that it's there. So the Fury of the North and the Sejuani really bridge them into a Riptide Rex game. So make sure that you level up your champions before Riptide Rex, and you put enough pressure on them that if they do happen to hit a Rex, you might be able to pick a card into a full grip that can actually, finish the game on the next turn. But you need to be looking in the turn by turn 8. So try and get in as much damage as you can, trade blows when you can. And overall, I think this matchup is a little unfavorable, but definitely not unwinnable. Make sure that you're getting the TF down. Again, this deck doesn't play much removal, though, outside of Sejuani. So if you can get a TF down on 4 and you can get leveled before the Sejuani can come down, then you can really win a game like that because they're going to be 2 turns away from Rex. So focus on leveling Twisted Fate as early as possible and Slotbot as well because it'll provide a big body. Those are the biggest ones with Jinx to finish it after snowballing off of that. Your mulligan should look to that. You don't need too much removal. If you have a Mystic Shot or something, that's probably fine against Jagged Butcher early, things like that. But for the most part, look for TF and try and level up as fast as possible. Mid-range Frostbite is another tough matchup for this deck because they have very sturdy units, and then they also play Culling Strike, and then most play Reckoning, which completely destroy our entire board. So it's hard to level up a TF in that spot, and it's also very difficult to get a Slotbot going when they have Culling Strike and Reckoning. But you got to do the best you can do in leveling that stuff up, and then your Slotbot is also susceptible to freezes as well as Sejuani, and then they can also provide big units on their board that are hard for us to remove with our, damage-based removal. So maintaining board presence is really easy. Also, they have Shafarian Glory Seeker, which is a cheap way to actually remove our champions. It's very important for us to level up our champions in our deck, and they can break up our combo pretty easily. We can focus on outdrawing them, and we do have a decent number of units that can chump block to keep us alive to try and get to that end. But if they see Reckoning, it's almost impossible for us to win. So be wary of that and play around as best as you can, but it's going to be hard to do. And try and level a TF if you can, because if you can get it leveled up, maybe even if you get it suit up, if you can put a suit up on that, then they can't kill it with Culling Strike. So you may want to time your TF in a time where you could also suit it up, or where they can't Culling Strike it, and then you could maybe go to the next turn and have the suit up to protect it from Culling Strike, and just hope they don't have Reckoning. And if you level up the TF, the game should be easy at that point if you have it protected, but you want to focus heavily on that. Jinx is not that good in this matchup because of the brittle steals and the other freezes, so the quick attacks are very risky. But outside of that, you want to just stick to your plan, level up your TF as best as you can, and try and win through that. Also, since there are so many freezes, the Jinx shouldn't be getting in combat. You should be using it as a draw engine after leveling it up, and then just getting rockets and shooting them in the face every turn, while doing as much chump blocking as you can do to try and end the game with direct damage. Braum Swain is a little different for a deck coming from the same regions, because the Braum doesn't apply super pressure on you, and then the Swain does, but the rest of their stuff is easily removed with your damage-based removal. So if you know that Swain is the only thing that you really have to worry about whenever it comes to blocking, then you want to look out for Brash Gambler to be able to block Swain. You also want Suit Up to be able to block the Swain. And if you focus on that, the rest of their stuff doesn't provide super pressure on you. So you only have to worry about making things stick. And they do have removal. They have Noxian Fervor and Death's Hand and Culling Strike and Ravenous Flock. And those are all very efficient removal spells. But if you can ever really get your slot bot big enough, or if you can get multiple champions in play at a time, if you can set up turns where their removal is down, you can play one champion, next turn you can play another one. It really will put a lot of pressure on your opponent to come up with the right removal in those spots. And if you get 2 or 3 of your champions, 3, because Slotbot is a champion in this deck, rolling at the same time, then it's going to be hard for them to win outside of the Leviathan endgame. Do note that if they do get the Leviathan endgame, you still burn them out with direct damage from your rockets and from your red cards from your TF while stunning them to try and stay alive. Generally, by turn 8, you want to already have leveled up a couple of your champions and snowballed into a win. They do have some blockers, but if you have chompers, you can really take Braum out of combat, which is huge, and push through a lot of damage. So overall, I think the matchup is about even. It's a lot better than the Ash Sejuani Reckoning deck. And you got to play smart and try and develop your board as best as possible. and then don't be scared to take a little damage early and not blow your removal spells to where you can actually save the removal for finishing off a Braum, which will make the board easier to attack into, or maybe even finishing off a Swain as well, or just going direct to face. They do have Conley Tavern Keeper to gain health, but if you can generate a lot of card advantage off of your champions, then you can easily plow through it. Burn Aggro and Crimson Elusives are similar matchups. They're both decks that are just trying to knock out your health as fast as possible. In those matchups, you want to mulligan into your Mystic Shots, maybe even your Get Exciteds and your early 1-drops so you can trade early, and then maybe use TF and Jinx to try and race back and gain control of the board. After gaining control of the board, you need to close fast, and then if you can save some of your removal spells to maybe counter Timely Noxian Fervor, that's one of the easiest ways to steal a game. Be wary of this before you point a removal spell. They might just be able to Noxian Fervor your thing. If you can draw a suit up, that's the biggest thing in the match, because you can make a 4/4 to maybe block a Fierce Impressive Pet and then challenge something on the way back while also pushing damage. Brash Gambler has a high toughness, which is good for blocking. Try and use as many open attacks as you can against this deck because they do have used Cast Salesman.
Won't find better this side of the sump.
But outside of that, keep maintaining pressure, make trades when possible, and then your champions will naturally win the game after that. So try and win the early game if you can, and then take as little damage as you can off their units, while then the development will happen naturally beyond that. Use your rummages aggressively if your hand is bad and you need to actually find something, because you can't really wait to turn 4 to start interacting with this deck. With the resurgence of Anivia and Braum decks, we've seen Deep come back into the fold despite the Dredge Treasure's nerf. I think this is very good for the Casino deck because the Casino deck largely levels up its champions before this deck actually gets into effect. You can largely ignore the Hapless Aristocrat, all the things that come before turn 4 outside of Jewel Hunters. And Jewel Hunters is the type of thing that actually can just be removed by Mystic Shot, Red Card TF, things like that. And its focus is generally going to be on trying to remove your champions. If you can just keep an eye for Jewel Hunters, you can safely level any of your champions before Devourer of the Depths can even come down. And if you get any of them leveled, then it's not too hard to finish a game. So to that end, they don't interact well with you because Wild Feast doesn't remove any of your champions. And many lists don't even play Grasp of the Undying either. And if they do, they're not developing their board. So get as many champions as you can down early. If you can play around Jewel Hunters, do so. And outside of that, you shouldn't have any trouble with this match. Because once you get a level TF, you can really run the tables with them. Do note that if they play Devourer of the Depths, you can put a Mystic Shot on it to save any of your champions. So keep that in mind, because it's going to be a 6-mana 4/4 every time. And if you put 2 damage on it, it keeps your champions alive. And then they're not going to have... And you're setting up like a turn 7 where you can hook their big blocker with Flame Chompers, get in for a lot of damage. Then you can stun them up with the leveled up TF, where you can start shooting fire and rockets out of the Jinx. Just keep them off tempo. With that, I just want to say I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a lot from it. If you have any more questions, definitely drop those in the comments down below. I check all the comments. I reply to every comment. So definitely look forward to any of the feedback as well. I want to leave you with these parting words. When playing this deck, remember that we have 3 champions. We have Slotbot, TF, Jinx. In that order, you should try and level them up, as well as making sure that we get the most out of our Rummage and our Pick a Card. Timing them is perfect. Remember that every single game, your turn 4 and 5 are probably the most important turns. And so setting those turns up to be as explosive as possible is the most important thing. Remember to pick a card and before your slot bot, pick a card when you have TF out. That's what I mean. If you can bank the spell mana to pick a card the turn that you played the TF, especially if you have a Rummage to be able to take advantage of the pick card on the next turn by pitching fleeting cards, that's huge. Jinx is generally the last one that you want to level up. Make sure you do it in those orders. And it makes sense because the Jinx doesn't want any cards in your hand. So knowing that, focus on your champions to level that up. Maintain a board presence when you can. Pressure when the pressure is going to put your opponent on the back foot. Know the matchups in that way. Make sure you check out my other gameplay videos to see how those matchups play, so you can see examples of when to turn the corner, when to be more aggressive, but generally focus on leveling your champions. That's the most important thing. Timing Brash Gambler is very important. When to suit up, when to wait, and the gameplay will explain a lot of what you've learned in today's video, so be sure you check out those videos. Give me a thumbs up if you learned something in this video, and make sure you tune in for other content. One love, good vibes, everybody. I hope to catch you on the next one.